6:33, could we please come to order for the Finance Committee? Number of items, so why don't we let's just go right down the agenda. In addition, Sarah Wank has asked if she could at some point in the meeting make a couple of comments, and I've granted that courtesy.
Comments in regard to what?
Pardon me?
Comments in regard to what?
She'll tell us.
All right, because it seems like every finance meeting, every time we get things added on at the last second to our finance. Last additions. It should be brief. It should be, if you have things to say, submit the paperwork or submit it ahead of time so that we have it prior to our meetings. Thank you.
First item is the modification, budget modification from Parks and Recreation. Budget modifications for grants previously awarded to the city, so it's carryover of unspent monies. New York, the DEC for electric vehicle charging station, DEC for Kingston Point, ADA accessibility improvements at Pool and Beach, and NYSERDA Clean Energy Community. They're all carryover of unspent monies from grants in previous years.
There's no financial impact to this transfer, it's just moving monies from into the 2020 budget as Julie's asked for. I would just ask that on the committee report, you just indicate that it's a 2020 budget modification right there, and it's $26,738. It's on one spot it says 238. Just mark that as 738.
Oh,
Okay.
26,
738.
7. Oh, I see. Okay. All right.
I'll make a motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Next item is, Mr. Mayor, talk to us about changes in economic and community development office.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. We, sent a communication about this early last month, and I appreciate you giving John and I a little bit more time. We weren't quite prepared for last month's finance meeting, so I asked that we move it to this meeting. As part of our restructuring of the community economic development, office, one of the things that we really saw that was a need was to be able to have someone who was much more dedicated to our Kingston City Land Bank, as well as all of the other housing issues that we've been working on. Brenna Robinson in that office has been trying to do kind of multiple jobs, both kind of doing economic development, doing the community development work, and also trying to manage the land bank and housing work. It just, it was too much. And so as we were looking at our plans for 2020, we met as a staff, and I was able to talk to them, and we really were kind of to focus on what was needed and how we should restructure. And so the concept of a director of housing initiatives came forward, which would allow us to be able to have one person that's hired that would not only be the executive director of the Kingston City Land Bank, but to be able to help guide all of the other cities' housing work. We really have never had a point person to be able to be here and available to both council members, city staff, the public, related to the issues of housing. And so, with that, concept in mind, we looked at, where we had some funds in the 2020 budget, and we identified a vacant position that's been vacant in the community development office for quite some time. And so we're proposing to transfer those funds, into this new director of housing initiatives, work and fund that position. We've attempted to begin the hiring process to be able to find someone to do that work. We put that out a couple of weeks ago. The job opening is open until March 29th, I believe. At that time, we'll look to see what our applicant pool is like, and we'll decide at that point whether it's good or if we need to continue the search. But we're really looking for someone that has experience in housing, both in the building of housing, the management of housing, because we do have a multi-million-dollar grant, to the land bank to be able to help get these projects, these housing renovations done, and we just really need someone with some guidance and understanding of being able to move that ball forward. And so that's one piece of the initiative. And the second piece that we also proposed was to be able to provide more support for my office, to be able to hire something that doesn't actually officially have a name yet. I call it Intergovernmental Affairs. The Civil Service Office is still, through the commission, is still deciding what that will be called. But we really want to be able to provide policy, legislative, and project management support. We've been really lucky to be able to work and get so much grant funding to work on so many really important projects. But at this point, our capacity to implement all of those projects and to be able to work on then other important community projects is definitely limited. And I think that if we want to be able to get our ambitious agenda, both the agenda that I set and the agenda that the council sets, done, we really need to bring in that support. And so we are proposing adding that position later this year. I do think it's going to take some time to be able to find the right person to be able to do that work and to be able to help work collaboratively with both myself and the Common Council on all of these initiatives. And so as part of the proposal, we're proposing that as well. And so John took some time to be able to put together the financial impact of what this would look like. I don't know if you want to pass that around.
Sure, this is...
But in general, the concept is that between the two positions, at least for the remainder of this year, we would get those positions created. The housing director would start on May 1, ideally, and the intergovernmental affairs, or whatever it ends up getting called, would start in September. And that would, there'd still be a couple $1,000 savings on this year's budget that would go back into contingency. But our, and then as we, go into next year's budget, of course we would budget for these positions, and be able to, by then we'll have also demonstrated, we believe, to the council that, these positions are, necessary and have been, helpful. But, at this point for this year, there would be no financial impact to the city other than a gain of, was it $2,000?
$2,000.
Yeah, $2,000 extra dollars kind of going back into contingency by the time we were, done with this initiative. So that is my proposal.
John, you want to review this?
Sure.
Where's the money coming from,
Yeah.
and how much we're talking about in salaries and?
Okay, yeah, if you want to give this back to me, I'll just give you the brief rundown. So the money is going to, so you have the Intergovernmental Affairs, or whatever that position's official title would be. That position would start approximately September 1st. It would at least provide funding for that position as of September 1st. The Director of Housing Initiatives would be May 1st. We've estimated both of their base pay is $65,000. But the calculation, the amount to put into those accounts is only based upon the portion of the year that'll be filled. So once again, Intergovernmental Affairs be September 1st. The total cost with benefits is $36,124.17
For September on.
for September on, and it's basically like as the mayor said, it's basically a wash. The Director of Housing Initiatives with a May 1st start date, once again estimated full year pay would be $65,000, but because it's only being filled from May 1st to the end of the year, salary and benefits is at $72,466.15.
How much?
$72,466.15, and I can hand this out if you want to. So the total cost of those two positions for the partial year is $108,590.32. Okay. The money is coming from the vacant project manager position in community development. That was budgeted at 87,000.
What was it, John?
87,000.
What position?
It's the project manager position. It's vacant. It's in Department 6989.
All right.
And the total cost is 87,119.77. Taking that out for the full year.
What is Department 698?
6989. It's economic development.
Who was this position?
There was none. It was vacant.
Was this-
And it was never filled.
That was in the budget
It was in the budget.
for 87,000.
119.77. That's salary and benefits. That's the complete
So what is the total for the project man?
119.77.
Okay, so
Yeah, the salary was 46,180 plus benefits gets you to the 119.77. I didn't move dental and optical, but
But for these two positions, you need a little over 108.
right. So the next change was there was a gap in hiring the confidential secretary for the mayor's office by a month. So we have savings there with, and then there was also a change in medical plan by that employee. The savings that were taken from the mayor's office is $23,489.49. That total is $110,609.26. So the difference is $2,018.94.
What was the total? 110 what?
609.26. And I'll pass this around you.
So the net benefit is $2,008.
$2,018.94.
Okay. Okay.
They're going forward.
Yeah.
So going forward, 2021. What is this projected? What is the projected salaries? Oh, have you done that? What's going to be the total?
2021?
Yeah, we were talking about this ending because 2020 has already started. So right
Correct.
now, for the rest of this year, it's 108,000 and some change.
Mhm.
All right, what is it to go forward?
I don't have that calculation in front of me.
Basically,
Mary, you want to
the
see-
salary, as we said, would be about 65,000 per person plus benefits.
Plus
Right.
benefits.
Yeah,
Right.
and so that would be part of my 2021 budget, would be to include either those positions, to eliminate those positions, it's all part of, we're kind of focused on, this is the work that we want to do this year. Obviously, we only budget year to year, and so, every year I have to come back to the council with a budget proposal, and so, our goal is that, we're not making any negative impacts on this year's budget. I'm getting the support and capacity that I need to, I feel, to be able to get the job done, and then next year I'll come back again, and, as part of my budget in October, you guys will be able to have a look at, what's there, what's not there, and, we'll have a better understanding of what the economy is gonna be doing next year, and,
But I'm presuming next year we're not gonna be able to find money available. It's gonna be in your budget.
New monies.
Next year.
yes.
So I guess my concern is, originally I thought they were grants for some reason, that they were gonna be covered by grants. So my question is, if we decide we don't need, we're gonna just let these people go, huh?
Yeah, and some of it is actually funded by grants. And so, like, for instance, the Director of Housing will actually have a majority of their salary back from the land bank, but that revenue is already in the budget. That money is already there. We already have over $200 and some thousand in revenue. Right now, we don't have a person in that position doing that work. And so we need to put someone in that position to do that work, to be able to get the money, to be able to meet your revenue, expectations.
But
And
we
so it
don't
is-
know next year if we're gonna have that grant, right?
Generally, I think we will know closer to the budget whether, we get or don't have grants or not. Usually that happens, by October. We have a general sense of what's gonna happen for the following year. So, yeah. I mean, that grant in particular was a multi-year commitment, but.
So then, why did we, if we didn't have the project manager position, so why didn't we just hire somebody into that if we already had that budgeted? That now we're going to come in something lower?
Yeah, well, this is, the project manager position was a position that was kind of a lower level position. This person will be a department head level person to be able to, manage our housing operations. So we needed a higher caliber and, higher qualifications.
So would this be union position?
No.
So this would be at the discretion of you, of the mayor's office, hire, fire?
It'll still be civil service eventually.
Civil service.
Yeah, so it may not be union, but it will still be, you'll have to take a test.
You will.
For the housing, yeah.
So to the director of housing, you're saying you're looking for someone with building and management of housing
Yep.
experience?
Mhm.
What else is on the, what is it?
Yeah.
RFP or is it?
Yeah, so most of the work that this person's gonna be doing is leading the land bank. So they'll be the executive director of the Kingston City Land Bank. And then the rest of their, time, that they have will be to help, implement, all of the housing policies and programs that you guys are talking about doing. That's clearly housing is a critical need in our community, and, we don't have anyone in city government that's, kind of the person to do that work. And I think, we have the Housing Authority, we have RUPCO, but, a lot of the stuff that we're coming up with, needs consultation and coordination amongst our own housing someone, I think.
So,
Yeah.
how do we, I want to phrase this.
Jeffrey.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, you're on the committee, go ahead.
I gotta get my thought back. All right, to the land bank. So I thought we had, it seemed like it was set up pretty well. Why are we abandoning what we had for something else? And, this is quite frankly a pretty high-paying position here. So instead of using existing staff, we're gonna take on somebody for, what I consider for here to be pretty high-paying
Yeah.
staff member. So what has failed with using existing staff, to do this job?
Just not enough capacity. And so we tasked one employee with managing a full-time job doing the land bank, a full-time job running community development, and a full-time job doing economic development. And we tried it for a couple of years. City saved some resources by when we as a city and council decided to combine all of that into one office. But in the end, when you add the Kingston City Land Bank into the mix, that grant pays for 3 of our staff, almost fully. And so, we have to be able to deliver on that grant, and we weren't doing it. With having one person tasked with doing all 3 jobs, we also weren't delivering on the community development funding either. And for those of you that have been involved in the community development process, I think that you see the amount of work that Brenna does and her office does. So imagine all of that, plus having to then run a multi-million-dollar nonprofit that is responsible for, renovating up to 20 homes, that the city is transferring to this organization. It just from a management perspective, we weren't getting the work done as quickly as our community needs to be able to get these houses renovated and out the door. And I think that, that's, been talked about, and I do think that, $65,000, is, high, but it's still, it's less than what Brendan is getting paid now, by a couple of $1,000s. And so it is still comparatively, in the realm of, the professional that we would need to kind of tackle these affordable housing, issues, because it is very complex. And especially when you get to construction, if you've ever hired anyone that knows anything about the construction industry, it's a relatively well-paid job. And so to leave the private sector to come and work for municipal government, our salaries have to try to be competitive as best we can.
Jeffrey? And then,
will the land bank board have any input in the hiring? And also, when basically people's jobs are being decreased, will that lead to any cuts in that department?
Yeah, and so I think, right now, we're not proposing any cuts in that department. That would be something, if we were, it would be part of next year's budget. In terms of the land bank board, they are gonna be involved in the hiring process, because they will be working with this person. I've told them that, again, in the end, civil service rules will mandate that eventually someone get pulled off the list, but being that, we're appointing this person provisionally, because we don't have a list yet, that they'll be able to interview the person, and they're looking forward to doing that.
Raymond?
So will anything happen to the pay of the other people who are in the departments that Brendan currently is running?
No.
And there's no plan to reduce their amount of work or to shift their position?
Not right now.
Not right now. So there is potential in the future.
Yeah, I think with the community development office in general, 3 of the employees are almost, not fully, but close to fully funded by community development block grants. And right now, the Trump administration has completely proposed a budget with 0 funding for community development block grants. And so, their salaries would, at that time, be completely cut. And so if that goes through, I hope it won't. He also proposed it last year, and the House and Senate decided to change his budget in that regard, but we're not sure about this year yet. So that's something to consider. The same thing on the land bank side, 3 staff people are fully funded by the land bank grant that we have. And so there's always opportunities, for positions that have to get cut, changed. The city also puts in a relatively hefty commitment of local dollars into that office, upwards of over 100,000 ourselves, into that office. And so, we always are evaluating that. So I would, at this point, we're not proposing to make any changes right now, but as we develop next year's budget, we'll definitely have to keep all of those factors in mind, when we present to you. One of the other pieces of this is the economic development work, and again, to kind of help relieve the office of, some of that work that just really wasn't able to get done. We've now partnered with, Pat Ryan and the county, and so we're working hand in hand with their county economic development office, so that, we're sharing leads, we're sharing information, and they're doing a lot of the follow-up that, our staff used to try to do, that was just really extremely limited based on the workload. And so we're, we've now, I think, gotten to a good place, and it's been, very fruitful so far.
And so then in the other department, the intergovernmental affairs one, how will that person be related to these, basically to Kristen, to Brenna, and to whoever's running the land bank?
Sure, and so this position will not be in any of those departments. This position will be located in my office, and they will work on everything from helping to coordinate and bring together all of the different departments. One of the things that we do is we have sometimes grant programs that span multiple departments, and sometimes it's really hard to have kind of a project point person, because we're not really ever sure who that person should be, because it's not necessarily this department and it's not necessarily this department. And eventually a lot of those grants end up falling on the grants management office because there's nowhere else for them to go. And so I do think that this person will help relieve some of that stress. But I also think that there are much larger city projects, whether it's some of our major, access information. So we've talked about sidewalk work that we want to get going, that we want to do with the Complete Streets Council. We've talked about work that we want to do on the charter. We've talked on other kind of bigger city projects. Oftentimes those projects don't fall into one department or the other. And so what happens is that they get given to a department head to manage, and it often is not high on their radar, and it often falls off the plate, if you will. One of those projects that, I think we saw that with is, this upcoming, zoning initiative, and I have a proposal today on how we would handle that at this moment, but we realized that we don't actually have a full-time person doing zoning stuff. And so, we don't have a professional that does that work, and so we really don't have the support and capacity that we need. And so we think that this person, will be able to grow and be able to help provide that support in city government for both all of us, because one of the things that I've also realized is that with the council, there's so many initiatives that are both kind of city staff, kind of admin side, as well as legislative council side, and many of these initiatives are kind of joint. And for me, I don't know about how all of you feel, but oftentimes I feel like the person that is the direct connection between everything that happens on the executive branch and everything that happens in the legislative branch, and sometimes I'm a little hard to get a hold of. And I'm a little hard to be able to work with because I also have a million other things to do. And so as a city, we don't have another person that's able to, do that effectively, to be able to be that liaison between the two branches of government, to be able to make sure that none of the balls get dropped. If you think of another example of a county, government, if you look at the county government structure, when they redid their charter, they were able to make sure that, of course there's the county executive, but there's also 3 deputy county executives, and there's also a couple of assistant deputy county executives to be able to help work in between. In this city government structure, we don't have any of that at all. And I think that is a need that I think I've identified, and I think other mayors over the years have identified, as it would really be nice to be able to have additional staff support in my office to be able to kind of get some of this work done.
And do you know of other towns, cities, municipalities similar in our size that have these kind of positions?
Yeah, most do. They all have different names for them. One of the recommendations that I've made, to the Civil Service Commission to try to find a name for this is, maybe Senior Policy Advisor. Lots of mayors have those. Another name is, Chief of Staff. Another name is Director of Intergovernmental Affairs. Another name that mayors call these things are special aid to the mayor. If you Google any of those, you will see dozens and dozens and dozens of cities that have these positions directly. That's kind of where when we pulled the job description, it's something that we didn't create. It's made by cities and across the country that have these, and I think even each city is different. Some have city managers, some have strong mayor forms, so you have to kind of dig a little bit into the details to figure out where the positions fit in. But that is something we saw a lot.
Are there any?
He was first.
Oh, I'm
Steve.
sorry.
No, Steve.
Oh, sorry. Are there
Then
any,
Tony.
pretty locally, not across the country,
Yeah.
you've been able to observe personally, or somebody, from your staff observe to see how these things match and how they work?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that we've seen locally is that looking at the county structure. The county is a little bit bigger than us. We've got 300 employees; they have 1,400, but they have basically a management team of 6+ underneath the county executive, where they divvy out the workload. They work properly between the legislative branch and the executive branch. But then there's even smaller communities, like I think Hudson. They have a position called special aid to the mayor. It's not the person that answers the phone when a secretary. It's someone who does projects. Even here, in the town of Sopus. If anyone has met Alex over there, that's a special projects manager for the supervisor. And so they work on special projects, and they, work for the supervisor, being able to make sure that, things get done, and they do a great job. And I think that's, what we are, we're trying to do is that our workload in our office, with, the confidential secretary position, that is in itself a full-time job based on the number of calls and call volume. But we really don't have anyone else that's able to kind of take these other initiatives and run with them, other than myself. And it's hard because we sometimes don't get everything done that we want to get done.
I got Steve, the second position is Director of Intergovernmental Affairs, and where we're going to, it might get named. There's no application out there yet?
No.
There's no RFP?
No, we wouldn't plan on putting that out until probably early summer, probably June, so that by September we'll have kind of gone through the interview process and got the person,
So this
hired.
person will be starting September 1st, so
Correct.
there's nobody in that position.
Correct.
To that.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had on that.
Michelle.
So just going back to the housing position, so you're kind of describing a situation where Brianna had like 3 roles, right? So it sounds like this new person would basically have 2 roles. And do you feel confident that they still would be able to focus on the land?
So my goal with the position is that for the first 2 years, most likely, this person will be 75 to 90% land bank, just because we have so much work to do. Once we get all of the systems in place and we get all of the, the housing renovation stuff working, and we have all of the contractors procured, and I think that they're going to be able to dabble in some of the other housing work that we need them to work on. But my main goal right now with this position, and being that we have grant funding to fund the position to do this work, being the executive director of the land bank is the #1 priority, and that's why, I've included the board in, his discussions about this position, and so they're excited to be able to have someone that they would consider more dedicated to them compared to, the previous where, Brenna was doing everything she could to try to do the work, but again, with everything going on, it was a lot.
One question for John. You mentioned that there's a position that is on the budget but never filled.
Yes.
Do you have an idea or an estimate of how many positions like that are on the budget never filled, and is that common practice?
No, it's not. I mean, typically a vacant position in the budget would be vacant only in that it would be temporary until somebody could be located for a job. It's relatively uncommon. I mean, I don't have a quote of a number, but typically, no. I mean, most of the departments, they take, like Public Works, for example, they want to hire whatever they have approval for. They don't sit generally on empty positions. So, I mean, a lot of departments, like say Public Works, are understaffed, right? So they need resources. If they have the resources in the budget, they're going to use them. I think this was an unusual situation where we just didn't have the right fit for that position. The mayor elected not to hire that, but no, it's relatively uncommon. I'm not aware of any other city hall that we have.
One of the issues that made this position unique is that it was a new position, and we don't have a title called project manager, and I think it just goes to show just how busy the office was, is that this position was also in the 2019 budget. And so it was actually there all year last year too. And one of the parts of it, because it was a new position and I had proposed it in the 2019 budget, you guys approved it, you had it in there. At the time, you're like, oh, that sounds great. We do need more project management support. Is that because it was so busy, Brenna never had the ability to work with civil service to actually create the job title, the position, to get it classified, to get it hired. And I think if it just goes to show, like, just their head was down in the work, and they didn't have the capacity to think about the future. And I think that's, again, it was proposed again, funded again, but I feel like now with this kind of reorganization and changing up of things, it's a much better use of the money. It still meets the need of the department, but that's why it didn't get filled last year or for the first.
And are they going to work out of the same office?
So the land bank, if you guys remember, they received a grant last year to be able to renovate and create a new office space on Franklin Street. So eventually they will move, into a new office space at some point. But that is right now they'll find a desk somewhere. The other two staff that they'll supervise are currently in that office. They'll most likely stay there until the renovations are all done, and then they'll leave. But so this new housing person will have to find a desk somewhere.
So that he or she will be able to fit in that where that space is right now.
Not in community development. It'll probably be at an empty desk somewhere in this building. I'm not sure where yet.
One other question, John. I just want to make sure I get these figures. So you said this would be a little over 108,000 for this year.
Yes.
Okay, and we had that from between the project manager, confidential secretary position. And so we would be saving the city for this year?
For this year.
How much?
Like $2,000 and change.
And then this would have to be proposed in next year's budget.
Right. So the difference for next year is that we're talking about two positions at approximately $65,000 a year before benefits.
Mm-hmm.
You're pulling out a position that was $46,180 plus benefits. So you have a slight difference in pay there, and you have the additional position the mayor's described. Every year we have to evaluate the positions that are in the budget and determine which ones to staff and which ones not to.
It's still not clear to me. I understand where you can scrape and get 2,000, to fund for this year. Starting May and September, you're picking and scraping and find money. I understand that. It's still not clear to me going forward in next year and the year after that. Are you proposing to fund all this mostly through grants, or
a lot of the position, for the housing position in particular, it will be grant funded, so most of that is going to, be grant funded. And so in the end, the position of whatever the intergovernmental affairs gets called, that would be a position that, at this point, we don't know if we have any grants, we don't know what
Right.
projects they're gonna work on. And so again, that will have to be by the time we propose the budget, there may be grant funding to help support that position. But we also have to kind of think of it as like, the housing position, will end up potentially being almost fully grant funded next year for, the land bank. And so that 46,000 that is in the community development right now that hasn't been spent, that was kind of city money, not grant funded.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of just maybe shuffling money around a little bit. And so for next year's budget, you may not necessarily see also a huge change in the budget because of that. We're basically would be moving it from, community development, there'll be revenue increase. So again, that's why John and I, when we're developing the budget, we kind of do this year-round budgeting concept, is so that right now we know we're making these changes, but as we go closer and closer to budget time this summer, we'll have a better understanding of revenues coming in, we'll have a better understanding of what the federal, revenue stream looks like for CDBG, and as we've talked about, is we've tried our best to present the council with a budget that doesn't raise the tax levy, and I'm confident that we're going to continue to do our best, and that's why we have those budget discussions. So you guys to ask me, look, we had this position here for a couple of months. How's it going? Is it useful? Should we fund this again? Or, those types of questions. Yeah.
Michelle?
So would the housing development position be then in the community development budget? Would it stay in there, or would it then?
It would basically create its own budget page for its own housing office.
Okay, and
Yeah.
then what about for the intergovernmental?
That position would get put in my budget in the mayor's office. Yeah.
Right, so, but the concern though is with all this moving around, you're creating 2 new positions. And I hear, I think we're with you with not raising the tax levy. At the same time, we don't want anybody to lose their job or lose their income who's working for us now.
Yeah.
So that's a major concern that we have.
Yeah, and so John and I mean, when we work on the budget, and we've done this already over the last, we often have created, as we've created new positions. Just this past year alone, we were able to create 10 new positions, I think, in the budget. Fund 10 new positions, and so I would just keep that in mind. We were able to have 3 new positions at DPW. We were able to have new full-time, 3 new full-time positions in City Hall alone in this budget. And so, when we do have to make changes in departments, like we always do our best to be able to either do it through attrition and move people around that way. I don't think ever, so far that I've been here, I don't think laid off any full-time employee from their job. And I don't hope to start that now. And so, again, if there's a huge economic downturn and, we are back like we were in 2009 when we had to lay off 20 employees, we'll all be back at the table having a big, much more global discussion about, what would have to happen in that regard. But, our intent is to not put people in positions that we, don't feel are critical to the operations, because we don't want to put people in that position.
Well, I mean, part of the fear, Randy, is position that's being used to fund is a vacant position, not an occupied position. So every time there's an employee who separates service, I know the mayor, evaluates whether or not that position is, do we need it? Could it be utilized somewhere else? Where does it provide the most value? So if that discussion happens every time we have a vacancy, and I'm sure will continue to happen. And when you are presented with the budget for 2021, you'll have the opportunity to have that discussion again as well.
Other questions? Yes, Michelle?
I guess I still feel like I need more information about like the intergovernmental housing person. So are there projects that you feel like we lost money or we were in a deficit because it took longer to coordinate, that then would equate to having a person and spending the salary?
Yes. I think one of the things that we, we struggle with, and John can attest to this, is that when we do projects, and many of them are grant funded, and over the years, and I'm not saying it's happening right now, but over the years, and thankfully because of the council's support, we have been able to develop the right amount of project capacity. But even now, we have over 60 active projects, and when we have a lack of coordination between departments, and when we have a lack of kind of follow through on some of these projects, it delays reimbursements. It delays us actually spending down the funds that the grant has given us, and so that's been one of the issues that you have seen, and I don't know, Michelle, you may not have gotten to see this yet, but one of the things that you'll see during budget time is that the council will often ask department heads about did you meet your revenue projections? And sometimes when the council members or the department heads say no, it's often because we haven't had time to actually spend on that grant. To be able to get those funds in. And sometimes it is just because of kind of the bureaucracy of city government, because one department didn't know that they were being, waited on to do this, and another department was waiting on them to do this, and, we think that by having someone that is able to oversee some of the more critical projects, we'll be able to move the wheels a whole lot faster. And we want to be able to make sure that none of that gets dropped, and which we think will increase our reimbursements, to have the money come in sooner, and make sure that we're getting those kind of critical projects done. So that's, I think, probably maybe the easiest example. There are definitely been others where we've dropped the ball on projects and have had funders send us letters saying, hey, why are you taking so long on this grant? Why haven't you got this done yet? But for the most part, it's really just about we want to just get things done faster. We want to get, as we know, some of these projects just take a long time, and we don't want to be the ones slowing it down. If the state agency is slowing it down because of what they need to do, we completely understand that, but we don't want to be the ones. And I think Kristen and her whole team, if you look at how we manage grants now compared to 3 years ago, like, it is a world of a difference. Like, we are getting projects in, we're getting contracts done, we're getting projects started, but I think we can do better.
This person would be helping out, I think, Chris?
So it will.
I mean, I know you said 60 plus active projects.
Yeah, so this person will be working, collaboratively with every department head. And so, I think as initiatives come up, if it's a police initiative, they'll be working with the police department. If it's a housing initiative, they'll be working with the housing director. If it's a council initiative, they'll be working with the president and the common council members. If it's a mayor's initiative, they'll work with my office. And so this person really, I think will be, and I hate to think about, what the future may hold, because, we don't want to be doom and gloom, but like, even right now with this coronavirus, this is my full-time job, is dealing with COVID-19. I'm living it, I'm breathing it, I'm on 1 million calls a day, but it's a struggle for me right now to also do all of the other work that is being required of a mayor, because I don't have a point person that I can really be like, okay, drop everything else you're doing. You are now doing COVID-19. Because every other department head has a whole entire work plan that is generally grant funded, so they need to do the work, and they have all of this other stuff. And so I feel like, if this is the type of thing that we're going to have to deal with as a community going forward over the next couple of years, like, we do need to add kind of that capacity and that, kind of flexible area that doesn't have a kind of a preconceived notion of they are working on this grant funded project and they can only work on this project. And I think that that's one of the biggest things, even with our, Arts and Cultural Affairs, Director of Health and Wellness, they are fully grant funded programs. And so they can't really help with other projects because their grantor is like, you've got to do this. And that's your year, and their salary is fully paid for, which is great, but it doesn't really give them the flexibility to do other things. And that most of our departments have that, because many of our staff are completely grant funded.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yeah.
So with these two positions, even though you feel like they may overlap and may interlock a bit, you feel like these two positions, or that one project manager would be able to handle things in some of the initiatives in your office, even though they will overlap at times?
Yeah, I think that the Director of Housing, is definitely a full-time position, especially with just the land bank alone. To get the houses all renovated and So that's definitely a full-time position, and I think that, this other position, will have a full-time slate of work, and so I do think it's 2 positions.
Any other questions? I will read the committee reports, very short. 2020 general fund budgetary transfers to multiple positional changes. Current year estimated financial impact is positive $2,018.94.
There's backup.
And the backup, which John has gone over, the details, I think you've heard it. I don't think it's necessary to go over it all again.
Or look at it.
But you can look at it. If anyone feel the need to look at the detail, I think you've got all figured. Yep.
You doing the bumps?
There's a meeting going on, they're not allowed to close that door. So are we doing a separate vote for each? I'm just asking a question, I'm sorry.
As the committee report is written, it's for multiple positions, 2 positions.
It's together because the funding from, it's not even, right? So the funding from the one position that's being, the vacant position that's being eliminated funds all of one position plus a portion of the other. That's why these 2 budgetary transfers. Or 1 budgetary transfer for the whole thing.
I want to give people a chance, if they want to look at these figures before we put this to a vote.
Steve, you haven't received any applications yet for this, the first one, the housing?
Hasn't won so far.
It's deadline of March the 29th?
Yes.
And has this been publicized where?
Yeah, so far, Civil Services did their normal thing, we put it out on Facebook, we did it in my mayor's newsletter, a couple weeks ago. And so I think that Civil Service posts them in Indeed, that's a job seeking website, Indeed. I think
Freeman, I'm assuming too?
I don't know if we really pay for the Freeman job ads ever. Yeah. Most people that do their search kind of do it online.
No.
Yeah.
So the only way it's being advertised for people out there is by if they go to the city website, they know about this.
And there's some job boards that it gets posted on online. Like I think Civil Service puts it on Indeed. I think that's like Monster. It's like one of those types of job seeking websites. I'm pretty sure they do that. That's kind of their normal run of course for all of our jobs. I mean, I'll double check, but our goal is to get a good, group. And if we don't have a good group, then we're going to keep it open.
My thing is that it would be great to find somebody local that can do this. And that's why I was wondering if it's been advertised locally. And so.
Yeah, our city's Facebook page.
Yeah.
Our city's Facebook page, we got a lot of shares, a lot of hits.
Okay.
We've got 10,000 people that like our page, and so that goes out to a lot of local people. And the Daily Freeman's been great about kind of covering these stories, and so I think everyone's going to probably be pretty soon about the fact that we may be having this position created.
Is there a motion on this?
I'm going to say one last.
Sure.
In my last video. I'm not really completely sold on this. However, we kind of have the luxury here with playing with house money, for the time being. So I'm more apt to go along with this because of the price tag on it, and to see how it works out. But I think we should keep an eye on this. I think we should really scrutinize it come budget time. I think you expounded on the question, my very first question is, we're not the people who put somebody out of work. So once we put these people on staff, and come budget time, we decide we don't have the money to do it, what are we going to do? I know we are not the type of people who are going to hit the bricks here. We're going to have to find a way, and I'm sure we will, because that's our nature. And that's part of my fear here, is that we're not gonna get grants to fund this, we're not gonna find money anywhere else. And next year, we're gonna be on the hook for
I mean,
But at this point,
sometimes we gotta make those tough decisions.
well, we do.
I have to,
Yes.
but nobody wants to do that.
It will be a tough decision, but anyway, we have the luxury of,
Yeah,
you know, seeing how this kind of
it's a test.
test,
Pilot.
a dry one.
This is a
Right,
pilot year.
Right.
That's, and I'm completely open to that. And anyone that I hire, they will know that too.
Is there a motion?
So I guess I should just say something. I wish that they were separated out, because I feel okay to go ahead with a housing industry person. I would like more time to really look into the intergovernmental and like feel positive about my vote for that. So I'm probably gonna vote no, just so that I can get more acquainted with it and do my homework. So,
Yeah, well, that's another question I have. Why, again, John, I might explain it, I don't understand it. Why do we have to fund this new position if it's not starting until September, which is the beginning of the next budget? Why do we have to, why does this have to be in here right now?
Why are you?
Why are we
doing that?
voting on the intergovernment affairs or whatever the position might be? Why does that have to be voted on today?
Well, the mayor's looking to move it forward. I mean, he's made a decision that this is a position that he would like to fund, that he would like the council's approval in advance. Obviously, the money would have to be there in advance of, I would think you would want it in advance of advertising and filling it. You know, you don't want to hire someone without having the funding there. So does that have to be the next month?
It's either kind of this month or
Perhaps
next month.
not,
kind of
right,
thing.
but I mean,
Like,
you know-
So we figured it'd be easier to do it together.
Within the next several months, you would have to, I would think, if you were to fill that position, you would have to do that at some point in the next few months. The other position's a little more imminent, but, you know, they
Other
were both,
budgets?
the mayor felt strongly about both positions, and, you know, we
And I should
found, we,
address it to you, Steve.
so we moved funding around, you know, we found funds in the budget that could be used to fund both those positions through one transfer. You know, if you're looking to separate them out, then that's, you know, a conversation for the mayor, but.
And the budget talks, budget starts in October.
Correct.
Well, our part.
Well,
You know,
Yeah.
yes.
end of October.
And that's one of the reasons why, just from, we talked kind of about the pilot cases, I want to be able to also demonstrate to the common council that, you know, as we go through the budget discussions, that, you know, one, if we can afford these positions, what are the value of these positions? And, you know, the sooner I can get them to start, you know, the more time you have to get to see the work that these do. And so for housing, thankfully, they'll be able to hopefully start in May, so you'll have almost more than a half a year, you know, before November, December, when you're really making the final decisions. Obviously, with the, you know, the other position, you know, September is kind of soon, so I want to really be like ready, have the person hired, their first day actually be September 1st, so that, you know, at least we've got a month and a half of, you know, some communications before I even turn over my budget, so then you guys get then another month of seeing this person, and that's, I thought, why I wanted to kind of do them, you know, now, so I could really start getting lined up. I wish there was more money in the budget for the position to start earlier, because I can assure you there is a large amount of work, because of all of these great initiatives that we're all jointly working on, that we want to be able to see to fruition. But you know, I recognize the constraints of the budget, and, you know, I felt like that was September was at least a couple of months of us being able to see how it happens. If it was July, it would be even better, but again, that's you know, extra money I don't think we have the luxury of having right now, so.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
A motion.
Second.
Ready? That was,
Yeah.
that was you.
Unless you want to sneak.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna vote yes tonight, I'm not quite sure how my final vote will be, but I'll vote yes tonight.
Opposed?
no.
So, and aye, opposed.
Correct.
Okay. Motion passes. Committee. Michelle, this is one of these forms you're going to write your name in,
Okay.
okay? Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
He's gonna be here for a while.